Hey there, it's Mandee Montana. Are you taking great care of your skin? You know I use great products. I take my vitamins and I drink plenty of water, but I could be better about applying sunscreen daily and making sure my skin is protected against premature aging. What about you? Well, I've got great news. I have a solution. It's the new Premium Diamond Glow Treatment at Hand and Stone Massage and Facial Spa in Tyler. I love it. I went recently and it exfoliates and hydrates your skin at the same time. Amazing, right? My skin feels so soft and silky after. You have to try it. If you've never had a facial before, they have different options at Hand and Stone, like hydrating and brightening. But if you're struggling with dark spots, hyperpigmentation, sun damage, sallow skin, enlarged pores, or maybe oily skin, this is the treatment for you. If you want your skin to glow and look and feel amazing, book the Diamond Glow. Schedule now by visiting Hand and Stone Massage and Facial Spa in the Cumberland Shopping Center in Tyler or online at handandstonetyler.com. Welcome to the Celebrating Women podcast, hosted by Mandee Montana, a podcast that celebrates women, their stories, their struggles, and ability to overcome. Conversations that celebrate their gifts, their talents, and courage. It's the Celebrating Women podcast, presented by Hand and Stone Massage and Facial Spa in Tyler, Texas. With over 20 massage therapists and 6 estheticians certified and trained in multiple protocols, you can get an affordable massage or facial located right here in the East Texas area. Book your appointment today. Stop by the spa in the Cumberland Shopping Center in Tyler or online at handandstonetyler.com. Welcome back to the Celebrating Women podcast. I'm Mandee Montana with a very special guest today. I've got Michelle Sandlin. And you know, sometimes in life you just run across someone and you feel like, I need to have a conversation with that person. That's kind of what happened with Michelle and I. She reached out to me on Facebook and said, hey, I see that you have a podcast. I think I'd be a good fit. And then we chatted. And I'm so excited to share her story with all of you. She is an author. She's a speaker. She's a writer. She's had a column in the Houston Chronicle. And she's got one heck of a story of courage and overcoming and some great nuggets for you. So Michelle, I am so excited to have you on the Celebrating Women podcast. How did you find me?
Yes. So first of all, thank you very much for having me on. And I've enjoyed meeting you in this very virtual way. So I was scrolling through Facebook one day a couple of weeks ago, and you know how you get those suggestions for friends, for groups, for different pages, and you came up and I thought, this is interesting. So I clicked on your page and saw that you were out of Tyler, Texas, which, gosh, that's so close to where I'm from. I grew up in Shreveport, but I was actually born in Longview and spent a lot of time in East Texas growing up. I was like, this is meant to be. I'm going to reach out to Mandee and see if we might be able to have a nice conversation. So that's how we met.
Yeah, and I was born and raised in Longview too. And so as soon as we connected on the phone, we started putting pieces together. And we have a lot in common. So tell me a little bit about... Okay, so you wrote a book, which is amazing. And it's, I think, a life goal for a lot of people. Sometimes we don't always have a story, though, and you've got one.
It's funny because I had a lot of ideas about, writing a book, obviously, as a writer. I mean, that's the ultimate goal, of course. And so I had been working for about 4 or 5 years, almost as a back burner project, working on a book of my own poetry that was really, personal. And I'd shared some bits and pieces out on social media, and it was very well received. And it's funny that, I thought that was my first book, but nope, not at all. What happened was in the summer of 2021, I was hit with breast cancer, like completely out of the blue. I didn't have high risk factors that I was aware of. I lived a very healthy lifestyle. I didn't drink. I didn't smoke. I didn't do drugs. I was a healthy weight. I worked out like a maniac 6 days a week. And then all of a sudden I'm hit with breast cancer. And through that, from diagnosis on through treatment, healing, and finding inner peace, I did what came the most natural to me, which was to write about it in all sorts of different forms, whether it was journaling, sharing things on social media, photographing, videoing, everything, because that was just, that's how I work. That's how I live my life. And when it was all over with, I was like, yeah, this is a book. And so it majorly helped me to process everything that I'd been through. But I didn't want it to be just about me, because it never was just about me. It was about that ability to share my story in a way that I thought would be inspirational and helpful and hopeful to other women and men and caregivers and family members that were going through this or any kind of struggle really in their life. I share a lot of, my own sort of philosophical musings, if you will, about life and so forth. But I also rolled in a bit of humor because for me, if you don't laugh in those moments that seem like the darkest, it can make it a lot more difficult. And so my daughter, I attribute her grit, her determination, and her just natural comedic presence to really keeping me in stitches some days when, what I wanted to do is just pull the covers up over my head. And so it's kind of a long story in telling you that, yeah, I wrote this book. It's not the book I ever thought I'd be writing, much less a first book or anything like that. And yet, here we are. Life throws us what life throws us, and we react the way we react. And I just wanted to be able to pay it forward and live my life in a meaningful way that could help others, uplift them in their dark moments. And hopefully, I think I've successfully done that to a large degree in writing this book.
Well, I am so excited to read it. I have it downloaded on my Kindle, but I haven't had a chance to get into it yet. Tell me, how did you get diagnosed? Was it a typical screening?
So that's a really good question. I had an all-clear mammogram about 4.5 months prior. I had a COVID vaccine and started experiencing some pain in my right breast. And so I had gone on to Google, as we all do, because Dr. Google knows it all. I read different reports saying that it's not uncommon at all for women to experience some lymph node swelling, some pain, some this or that. And it was still it was 2021, June of 2021. There were a lot of things that people didn't know in terms of side effects at the time. And so I kept attributing it to that. It was an intermittent pain. So it was persistent, but intermittent. So it was easy to say, okay, this is just something I need to deal with for a little while. But one night, I couldn't sleep. The pain had gotten so intense. It felt like someone was literally poking me in the breast with a needle. It was sharp, it was painful. And so I started feeling around, and I thought I felt a lump in my right breast. I knew I felt a lump, but you go through this whole cycle in your head where you try to talk yourself out of it. And my husband's asleep next to me, and I didn't want to alarm him or me. And so I sit up in bed and I'm feeling around. I lay back down, I sit back up, and I'm like, yeah, I think that's a lump. And so the next morning I got up, I went into the bathroom, and I did the whole self-examination thing again, lifted one arm, the other arm, both arms. And it was tiny, but you could see it, you could feel it. And it was definitely something foreign that I'd never experienced on my body before. And so I went downstairs where my husband was and asked him to feel it, because he knew I was experiencing this pain, but we both were just like, it's probably a side effect. And I said, feel right here. And he very famously, like a lot of men might say, the only thing I feel is a boob. And so I was like, no. I need you to feel this, because there's definitely something here. And he never said that he could feel anything. That's how small it was. But I knew that I needed to call the doctor. So I called the doctor right away. And this is like the first, part of the battle for me. Is I called my OBGYN's office and I said, hey, I've been experiencing pain, and now I've found a lump, so I need to come into the office. I always thought when you said words like I found a lump, that they were like, oh, you call right now and come right down. And they were like, oh no, we can't see you for like 3 weeks. I'm like, well, that's not going to work. I thought the Red Sea was going to part and usher me in, but it was nothing like that at all. And so I was like, no, this isn't going to work. That very first experience taught me that it was up to me to fight my way through. It was still the tail end, I guess, of COVID. And so there were all these restrictions in place. Doctors didn't really want you to come in unless you absolutely had to. And so, they were unprecedented times,
Right,
and so I pushed hard. I was able to get an appointment right away with the doctor. when I went to see him, he said, yeah, I feel a mass, but I don't think it's cancer. But I want you to have a repeat mammogram and ultrasound. And so I got that scheduled. Again, they told me, like, we can't see you for 3-4 weeks. And I had to push my way through until I got an appointment like the next day or two. I went for a mammogram. I don't even remember the mammogram. The ultrasound I remember because the radiologist, you could just read it all over her face that something wasn't right. I said to her, just tell me. I mean, something's obviously wrong. What is it? And she said, well, I'm 80% sure it's positive. I said, positive for what? And she said, positive for cancer. And I was like, holy cow. She wanted to do a biopsy that same day, which we did. And so that was on a Friday. And on the Tuesday morning, I got a call first thing in the morning. The same radiologist said, yeah, it's breast cancer.
Wow. So within about a week to 10 days, you found the lump, advocated for yourself consistently?
Yeah, so it was, I think I must have found the lump and got in to see the doctor and had the biopsy and everything all within maybe 6 days.
Yeah.
Maybe it was all very, very fast. And it was just 4 days after having a biopsy that I got my diagnosis. And, that's a thing too, because I didn't have a history of breast cancer in my family.
Right.
My mom didn't have it. My grandmothers didn't have it. I didn't really have a history apart from, what you see on TV or the movies or knowing somebody distant that, maybe had it. I thought, number one, all breast cancer is the same. Cancer's cancer. Not at all. It turns out the type of cancer that I have is what they call triple negative, which means the thing that they test for to see what it's receptive to were all negatives. And it turns out that of all the people that have breast cancer, only like 10 to 15% are triple negative. And so when the radiologist said to me it's triple negative, I thought, okay, I'm positive for cancer, but it's triple negative. So negative's a good thing. Not at all. It becomes very tricky in terms of how they treat it, because type of chemo cocktail that's available for somebody who has that particular triple negative cancer is very small. And the tumor is aggressive, so my treatment had to be aggressive. And so I just kind of, on the day I was diagnosed, turned a corner in terms of, I guess, my mindset and everything. I was like, okay, if this thing's aggressive, what do we need to do? I'll report to chemo today. Just tell me, what do I need to do? And so honestly, I'm very blessed that things did move really quickly after that. As soon as I was diagnosed, it was like boom, 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 boom. Within 2 weeks, I had my first round of chemo. I had to have a port put in. I had MRIs, I had EKGs, all of these things. But I think, one of the saving graces for me is that very early on, as soon as I was diagnosed, I told everybody around me, hey, no tears. This is not the time for tears. This is the time to lift each other up. We are not going to boo-hoo, because I need to surround myself with every bit of positivity that I can get my hands on, and lots of prayer and good vibes. And so it's a hard thing when you have to tell your loved ones that you've been diagnosed with cancer, because the first thing you hear is the cracking of their voice.
Keep it
remain
together.
positive and trying to keep it together. And so I think it was important that I told them during that first conversation, look, I'm calling the shots now, because I'm about to lose control of everything else I get to make decisions on, but this decision is mine, and we're going to keep it right up here. And that's one of the things I think that surprised me about myself, because I would say before that, I tend to lean more towards the glass half empty versus a glass half full. But in that moment, I knew it was time for reducing and removing every bit of negativity and toxicity that was around me, whether it was people, things, anything that didn't serve me, because everything had to go into this fight. I needed all this positive energy. I needed just everything we could muster. And
how did you know that, Michelle? I think that that's such a key piece in your journey, but I've heard it. It's like a through line that I hear in so many cancer journeys. And I think I briefly shared with you on the phone that my dad's gone through.
Yes.
He's battled leukemia since 1987, and he's currently dealing with a few different kinds of cancers, but he stays super positive, doesn't let anybody get down around him. It's been a game changer. I mean, he's managed to overcome and overcome and overcome, because he's just like, I have too much to live for. So how
Yeah.
did you know that that's what you needed to do?
That's a great question, because I'm somebody who overthinks everything. But in this moment, there was no time for that. I
Yeah.
mean, it was never a conscious decision, really. It just was like, this is
It's
what's
like a
going to happen.
switch flipped in your brain and you said,
A
okay,
switch
this
flipped.
is it.
And I'm somebody who suffers, or did suffer before this, tremendously from anxiety. And so I recognize that, quick motion of everything just kind of firing in your brain at one time. And I was like, okay, everybody listen up. This is the way it's going to go. And I was very fortunate that they all abided. It was
That's
like,
amazing.
okay. And I think that's how, when something's really wrong, when everybody does what you want them to do. Any other time they might buck the system, but
Right.
in this moment, they were all like, whatever you need, we're there, we're going to do it. But there wasn't a conscious decision. It just kind of kicked in from somewhere.
Yeah. So when you had that conversation with them and you asked them, hey, we're going to stay up here. It's going to be positive. I need laughter in my life. I need to have fun. I need to focus on this fight. And they all abided. What were some of the things that you did as a family to keep it at that level?
Yeah, so that was hard too, because we were still in the middle of COVID.
Yeah.
And I wasn't worried at any point about getting COVID for COVID's sake. What I was worried about is having anything that would become a complication.
Right.
And so we had, some family dinners. We had, a few outings here and there. But towards the end of my treatment, and I'll get into my treatment too in just a minute, but towards the end of my treatment, my immune system became very, very compromised. And so anything that would throw a monkey wrench into the trajectory of everything that needed to happen was an absolute no-go, because I didn't want anything to slow the process. And so that became a little difficult. And so we had to rely towards the end on a lot of FaceTime videos and things like that. And, I even had so many people who would bring me meals and things, and my husband would go outside and he wouldn't let me go, out and meet them or whatever. But I felt like a little kid. I would go to the driveway and just kind of wave to my friends and say, oh, I'm so glad to see you. And I said this in the book. It felt like when you were a kid and you would be home from school sick and someone would bring your homework and your mom would let you see your friend for 2 seconds to get your homework. You didn't feel good enough to go to school, but you definitely felt good enough to see your friends.
Yes.
So I liken it to that. But yeah, it becomes very, very isolating. And with isolation comes loneliness. And that was one of my biggest battles.
So how did you overcome that? Through your writing?
Yeah, I think it was through that, but also documenting everything that happened on social media. In fact, when it came time to let the world know that I was diagnosed, I went straight to Facebook, and I wanted to do it before I lost that first strand of hair, which is a big deal.
Yes.
And so that's also the moment that I first spoke the words "Cancer Don't Care," which is the name of my book. It just kind of came out. And I think it came from that idea that when at the beginning of COVID, when we couldn't go to the hair salon, that people were saying COVID hair don't care.
Yeah.
And so I guess that was kind of in my head. And so I went on, Facebook. I turned the camera on myself and I said, don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do drugs, I'm healthy, I don't understand this, but cancer don't care, cancer don't care. And the more I thought about it, all the questions that you have, it's like, why did this happen to me? What have I done wrong? It doesn't make any sense. That the answer kept being cancer don't care. It's indiscriminate. It can happen to anyone. It doesn't care who you are, what you look like, what brand of toothpaste it doesn't give a what. And so that became, kind of the battle cry, so to speak, I guess, for, what I would title the book. But in terms of like what kept me connected to people, I think being able to go online and share my story in what I hoped would be a way of kind of lifting the veil on everything I was going through. I mean, I turned the camera on myself every time I was in the chemo chair and said, okay, this is round 4, and here's how I'm feeling, and here's what we're doing, here's what's coming next. And it allowed me, I think, to stay connected, to let people, and there were a lot of people that were, really pulling for me and praying for me and everything, to be able to keep them updated by saying it once instead of, trying to do all of these things. And I think even the video where I announced my diagnosis, I already had said the words, I have cancer, so many times that one, it didn't even sound like a sentence that would be coming out of my mouth. Didn't sound like my words at all. But also, I just couldn't bear having to tell the story so many times in the early days, because there was a lot to do. I mean, there was a lot of preparation, organization. There were appointments, going to see my lawyer, making sure everything was solidified. I mean, things that you don't think about suddenly become uber focus. And so I think being able to share that story as we went online was very helpful. But I also had people, who were calling me and I was calling them, and just trying to stay in touch, in that way was really helpful. And then I had 2 friends in particular, one who was a 10-year or more survivor who had also had triple negative, which was the type of breast cancer that I had. And so we had a lot of conversations and questions about the whole process that didn't really rise to the level of needing a healthcare provider to answer. Like, what kind of protein powder did you use? What did you bring to chemo? Did you wear a hat? I mean, all of these things. And then I had another friend who was in the trenches right along with me with breast cancer, but was, a few months ahead. Hers was a completely different kind of breast cancer, but I'm not a misery loves company person at all, but it is so helpful to have someone who, understands and that you understand, and you have that kind of give and take. And she was probably the only friend that I felt comfortable just like, let's meet up for coffee. Let's see each other in person, because we were both like immunocompromised or whatever. And it was just like, let's just do this. And we would sit for, 2-3 hours just talking. And did we talk 100% about cancer? Almost.
Really?
but I mean, it's like when you're going through it, there's very little else.
I can see that.
It's top of mind, it's tip of tongue. I mean, it's all of this. And, we would try to kind of, deviate the conversation into other areas, but it always comes back to what we're going through. And that was really helpful. And because they were both definitely my lifelines in so many ways while I was going through it, I was determined and, made promises to people. Hey, if you know someone, even while I was still going through treatment, if you know someone and they want to talk to someone, here's my number, please give it out. And to this day, I speak to women all the time about what they're going through, whether it's on the phone or through text messages or whatever. And I'll never, ever stop paying it forward.
Oh, I love that. And it's such an that understanding is like true empathy, right? Because
yes,
like you said, they're in the trenches with you. So I'm curious, did you know these 2 women before your diagnosis? Were you already friends, or are they women that you got connected to after your diagnosis?
Yes, they were both friends that I had known for probably 25 years or more. So yeah, I wouldn't say that they were my best friends, but they were friends and women that I greatly admired. And so they both reached out to me before I reached out to them when they heard I was diagnosed. And it was just the outpouring of mutual love and respect is just unbelievable.
I would imagine they're extremely proud of you now for paying it forward in such a big way.
I think they are, and I hope so, but I don't know how to not do that. I mean, that's probably when I think about how do you take something that was a really kind of crappy experience and turn it into something that is meaningful. And that was something that I was searching for, a meaningful way to kind of do something before I was even diagnosed. I was looking at where I was professionally and personally. And like I said, I'd been writing this other book for about 4 or 5 years and had to back burner it. But I was looking for a goal, but there didn't seem to be one in sight. And it's funny how God kind of just, you ask and he delivers. And people have asked me before, are you angry that this happened? Are you angry at God? I mean, how do you come to terms with it? And I'm not angry about it at all. I recognized from the very beginning, hey, this is a life and death moment. I am definitely faced with my own mortality, but I knew that it was not going to be the thing to get me. And I told everybody around me, I'm going to fight this. I'm in great shape. And I do think that's why I've been working out so much, because I needed to be in really, tip top shape to fight this in the most optimal way. And yeah, so I never thought it would be the thing to get me, but I do know that it was the thing to test me. And it's from that test, I think, that you gain some new strength and insight and courage, and kind of bottle that up and then try to produce it out into the world in a way that, like I said, I was looking for something meaningful. And yeah, I got something meaningful to do as a result, but I don't regret that it happened. I'm not angry that it happened. Do I worry what the future looks like? Of course I do. That would be silly not to. But I also know that people plan, God laughs, right? So
Yes,
it's
yes.
not up to me. I can live my life and live every day how I want to live it. But at the end of the day, my fate is up to, not me.
I can so relate to that. And I think that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you as a guest once we connected, was I thought, your story is so relatable. We all go through hard things, whether
Yes.
it's a personal cancer battle or a loved one or something totally unrelated. Maybe it's divorce or some
Yes.
other massive challenge in life. But it's like you're saying, we go through these tests, we go through these difficult
Yes.
times, and they can become very meaningful if we allow them to. And I think that's part of what makes you special. But I think it's something that we can all find within ourselves and make us special as well. Your courage is so inspiring. I know you.
Oh, well, thank you.
You mentioned a little bit about your treatment. Did you want to get into specifics and talk about that?
Well, I'll just kind of give the Reader's Digest
Okay.
version. So I had 16 rounds of chemo. The first 12 rounds were every week. So that was grueling. It's a
Yeah.
vicious cycle. I lost my hair, or started to lose my hair, after the second round, as promised. That's what they said would happen. And so that happened. And then the last 4 rounds were what they call Red Devil, which is like a really potent, cumulative, compounding chemotherapy. And again, like I thought all breast cancer was the same, I thought all chemo was the same. Not at all. There are a lot of different combinations. And so these last 4 rounds, they were the worst. I was just faced with absolutely debilitating fatigue, like the kind where you can't really lift your head up off the pillow. And for somebody who's naturally high energy and active, that was the hardest, part for me. If you think about, like, in an ordinary day when you're feeling your best, you're at 100%, right? I went for these 12 weeks, I was at about 30%, like the whole time.
Oh, wow.
So it's like everything, comes down. And there was a lot of nausea, but they gave me a lot of nausea medication to try to stay ahead of the nausea, which does, guess what, makes you sleepier. And so it was a bad last 4 rounds for me. But after that, I had a month to prepare for surgery. And what I had was a double mastectomy. And the reason for the double mastectomy is, with triple negative breast cancer, it's very associated with the BRCA1 gene mutation, which is the breast cancer gene. And so they did genetics testing, found out that I had the BRCA1 gene. And so what that means is that my risk factor for developing breast cancer in my other breast, or for recurrence, or for ovarian and some other types of cancer were much higher than the average woman, which probably explains my propensity for developing breast cancer to begin with. And so because of my risk being so high for developing cancer in my other breast, it was a no-brainer. I want to mitigate, as much as possible, any likelihood of recurrence. So I did a double mastectomy and reconstruction surgery, and I had what they call a deep flap, where they take your own abdominal tissue, which means I also got a tummy tuck, which I don't hate. I don't hate that at all.
I have another friend that had that same procedure done.
Yes. And so it's nice in the sense, too, that everything comes from me. There's no foreign implants or anything. It's my own body just relocated and redistributed and all of that. And so the healing process from that was a bit longer than if you'd had implants or whatever, but it's kind of a and I shouldn't say one and done, because we had a few revision surgeries, but that was the best option for me.
Felt more natural.
Yeah, definitely. And then they also take your nerves from your abdominal tissue and relocate them on your chest as well, so you can maybe get some feeling, sensation back. Have I had any feeling or sensation back? Not really, but there's always hope. There's always hope. But that right now, I mean, that's like the least of anything, honestly.
Right.
And then about, February, March, April, May, 3 months after my double mastectomy, they removed my ovaries and fallopian tubes. I'd already had my uterus out in my 30s. So I'd had a partial hysterectomy and then the completed part of the hysterectomy. And and then it was, waiting for the hair to grow back.
Yeah, which you have beautiful hair now. I'm glad we're on video so that I can see you. You're a beautiful woman.
Oh, well, thank you very much. And so I guess it was maybe within almost a little less than 2 weeks, I got the pathology report. I had a meeting with my breast surgeon, and she told me that my pathology report showed, clear margins everywhere, and I was completely cancer-free. And so, thank God. Yeah, all the prayers, everything had worked. And, one of the things I would like to mention, Mandee, that I think kept me sane, in the sense that it also kept me connected to the life I had before cancer, was that throughout my treatment, I kept working out. I'm a big Peloton bike junkie.
Yeah.
And I rode the Peloton every single morning before chemo. And in my mind, I felt like I was preparing my veins for poison going in by, doing something healthy before that happened. And I did that up until, the very last round of chemo. Now, my first round of chemo, I was able to do, a normal Peloton ride. By the last one, I was like 10 minutes, like a sloth on a Peloton.
Yeah.
But I made that promise to myself, and it was very important. I kept lifting weights, and I also did walks around the neighborhood and things like that to stay active. But apart from that, I mean, it was a very isolating time. I mean, it's hard to put it in any other term other than isolating.
I love that you stayed active and that you talked about it, because I think that's one of the, from what you've said, I've not experienced this myself, but from what you've said, that extreme fatigue, overcoming that is massive, because when all you want to do is sleep, it's really hard to make that commitment to yourself to move.
One of the things that I used to do, it was like a life hack for me, is on days when I could get out of bed, my goal was to, and I got dressed, when I say get out of bed, I didn't just get out of bed, showered, put on full makeup, lipstick, perfume, jewelry, just like normal, because my mom would always say, look good on the outside, feel better on the inside.
So
and
true.
I lost my mom a couple of years before cancer. And so a lot of her little sayings would just play on a loop in my head. So every single day, shower, wash the 2 hairs on my head and get dressed and put on lips, the whole thing. And then I would go into my office and I would just force myself to sit if that's all I could do, because to me, sitting was better than laying in bed. I would sit in my office. I would pick up books from my bookshelf. I'd, fumble through those. I would pick up my journal, write in my journal. I would pick up the phone, call a friend, whatever I could do, because I felt like if I was even the minimal activity felt like progress,
Well, it was.
anything to keep me out of bed. And, sometimes I would just watch the clock and be like, okay, I've been in here 30 minutes. I can do anything for 30 minutes. Now, what if I could do it for an hour, And I would just busy myself. I'd turn on my computer. I'd, scroll through Amazon, whatever it was, buy a new pair of shoes, whatever it was, just to try and keep me from being in that bed.
And focusing on the thing that was pulling you down.
Yes.
You were focusing on future things.
Yes.
And I think that's so important that you talked about even just setting those small goals, like whether it's cancer, depression, whatever you're going through.
Yes.
My friend sent me this self-care app, and it's the silliest little thing. It's kind of like a game. It's called Finch. And some of the goals are like brush your teeth, wash your face, and you check it off and you get points, right? So it feels, almost like a video game, like you get some sort of dopamine hit, I think it is, whenever you see, that like you're earning points. But, those are things that when you're not feeling like yourself, when you're not feeling good about yourself for whatever reason, they actually make a difference.
They do.
That little bit of
really
taking care of yourself. And talking about putting on full makeup and taking care of yourself, putting on jewelry and getting dressed, it truly does make a huge difference. I work from home now, and the days that I don't do it, I am a lot less productive. So most days now, I get out of bed, I'm washing my face, I'm brushing my teeth, I put on full makeup. I might not ever leave the house.
Right.
But I feel like it sets me up for success. And so I love that. I mean, those are small things, but they can be so meaningful and so important when you're doing them consistently to take care of yourself.
Well, even just something small like making a to-do list.
Yes.
And even if I was like rewriting the one from yesterday, just to like feel my hand around my pen and on the paper and all of that, because I felt like if I was writing things down like pay Visa bill, do the laundry, it was something different from saying chemo, oncology appointment, all of these other things that were just almost manic in the sense that they were just happening, day in, day out.
And happening, it probably felt like happening to you.
Yes.
Where you were in control of even the simple things like paying a bill or doing the laundry. Yeah. And
Well,
and I think we have that in common.
People.
Like the things you can be in control of can be really important.
Yes. Well, for me, and it sounds like you too, I'm a definite control freak. And in this particular situation, I had to hand over the keys. And that was so, so difficult for me. But I recognized that it was necessary. There was nothing I could do about it. And so what I looked for were the things that I could control. And exercise was one of them. What I ate was one of them. The people that I allowed, around me was another one. And to a large degree, how I spent my time, it became pretty impossible to work. I was doing a lot of freelance writing up until my diagnosis, and I had to let all of those clients go because, it doesn't take long before this phenomenon they call chemo brain kind of kicks in. And the idea of writing anything, coherent for, a corporate client or anything was absolutely out of the question. And so my writing became, more for me and about what I was going through physically, emotionally. I kept a separate health journal, which I still keep to this day, where I talk about, every appointment, the side effects of every medication, how I'm feeling, because in my mind, I had let this pain in my breast go on for some weeks before I picked up the phone to the doctor. So if I ever have a doctor say to me, how long has that been going on? I can look back and say, oh, well, this happened on this day. I had this for breakfast, this for lunch. I was wearing this, I was all the details.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important.
Yeah. The power of journaling. Truly. Obviously that's something that's important to you and you've carried, it sounds like maybe throughout your life,
Yes. I mean, as long as I can remember, I have been writing and journaling and, really documenting my life in some form or another.
Well, I am so honored that you shared your story. I know there's a lot more to it, and I would love
Yes, but I get it.
for
Yeah.
you to come back.
Oh, sure.
What if there's anything that we haven't covered that you feel like is paramount that you mentioned today, aside from, I definitely want you to talk about where we can get your book, but something that's meaningful that maybe I haven't touched on yet or that you haven't touched on?
Yeah, I think this is so important. And it's something that I preached in my video messages to people on Facebook. And I still continue to say to this day, and it's this: nobody knows their body better than you do. And so if anything doesn't feel right, or you don't feel right, or you're not sure what something is, do not wait. Please, please, please call your healthcare provider right away. Get an appointment. If they tell you they can't see you for 3 weeks, you tell them no. You tell them get you in, or you get another doctor, because time can very much be of the essence. And for me, once they found the tumor, I mean, it was already stage 2B. So it was growing quickly. It was replicating quickly. And so I don't know where I'd be if I'd waited another week or two, or if I'd listened to the nurse at the doctor's office tell me we can't see you for 3 weeks. I mean, that would be unacceptable. And so my message to everyone out there is to pay attention to your body. Always, always, always. And if something doesn't feel right, look right, or you have a gut feeling about something, call the doctor.
I love that. I think that is so important. And I'm so glad you circled back to it, because I was hoping that you would. So Michelle, I'm so excited to read your book. And I know I found it on Amazon, but where can my listeners find you?
Yeah, the best way to find it is on Amazon. It's called Cancer Don't Care, and it's available in the Kindle version, a paperback, and a hardback. And I'm very excited to announce that the Audible version will be out in the next few weeks. We did a wrap on that in the studio just a couple of weeks ago, and that was an interesting project. Probably a conversation for another day. But I will say this:
I would love to have that conversation with you.
I will say this one thing. My daughter was the narrator, and it makes it even more meaningful to me. And I listened in the sound booth as she's reading my words, and it was very emotional. But oh my gosh, she's amazing. She did a great job, and I can't wait for people to hear it.
Well, I would love for you both to come back once it's available and have a conversation about that process. And I'd love to hear her reflections too on what it was like to be part of your support system, if that's something you're open to.
Absolutely. She was a big part of my story, and she's got an interesting story to tell as well. So there's a teaser for you.
Wonderful. Well, Michelle, thank you so much for your time today. I'm so
Absolutely.
Excited to get to know you and hopefully stay connected and cheer each other on.
Same here. Thank you very much.
The Celebrating Women podcast wants to hear from you. Email us a voice message to celebratingwomenpodcast@gmail.com. We would love to hear your story or the story of an incredible woman you know. Become part of the conversation on social media. Facebook.com/Celebrating Women Podcast. On Instagram, search Celebrating Women Podcast. The Celebrating Women Podcast has been presented by Hand and Stone Massage and Facial Spa in Tyler, Texas. Book your appointment today. Stop by the spa in Cumberland Shopping Center or online at handandstonetyler.com. Support the show for as little as $3 per month at celebratingwomenpodcast.buzzsprout.com or visit our show notes. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe to the Celebrating Women podcast. Hey guys, it's Mandee. Have you been struggling to lose those extra pounds? Oh, I know, I have totally been there. An extra, 15 to 20 pounds can totally creep up on you in perimenopause. Or at least it has with me, and I think I found it early. I hope it's not happening to you. But if it is, I've got the solution. You can lose up to 15 pounds in 8 days with an incredible product line that I found and I want to share with you. Get a custom product recommendation with a complimentary wellness screening in the show notes. Just click Zing with Mandee.